All right, welcome to Hoops Tonight here at The Volume. It is Mailbag Day. Thank all of you guys for dropping questions in the YouTube comments. Remember, if you want to get your questions into our mailbag, target our full episodes, go into the comments, write mailbag with a colon, and then write your question. That's how we can easily sift them out from the comments, and we will hit a mailbag at least once a week moving forward in perpetuity. You guys know the drill. Before we get started, subscribe to the Hoops Tonight YouTube channel so you don't miss any more of our videos. Follow me on Twitter at _JasonLT so you guys don't miss show announcements. Don't forget about our podcast feed wherever you get your podcasts under Hoops Tonight. It's also super helpful if you leave a rating and a review on that front. Don't forget about our brand new social media feeds on Twitter, Instagram, and Facebook, where Jackson's making excellent content for us throughout the year. Make sure you guys follow us there. And last but not least, keep dropping mailbag questions like I mentioned earlier in the YouTube comments so we can keep hitting them throughout the remainder of the season. All right, let's talk some basketball. This is a fun one off the top. Kind of a fun question. What with Boston and OKC looking like the clear two best teams, it's very likely they could end up facing each other in the finals. I'm curious to hear your take on how they match up. I would imagine Porzingis would defend Chet. Tatum would defend Hartenstein. Brown would defend Shea. Holiday would defend Dort. Derek White would defend Jalen Williams. Is this close to what you'd expect, or do you disagree with me? Also, if possible, could you maybe list what you think would be the key factors for each team to win a 7-game series? Love the show. Keep up the great work. I hope your skiing trip was tons of fun. Thank you for the kind words and for the support. I agree with you that Boston and OKC are looking to me like the clear two best teams. I don't think they're separated enough to be on completely different tier than the teams that I have below them, being right now Cleveland, Denver, and the Lakers, but teams like the Knicks or the Warriors could potentially join that tier for me as well before the end of the season. But I do think that there's a slight gap between those two teams and the other teams. I think it's more likely that OKC gets upset in the Western Conference than Boston gets upset in the Eastern Conference. That said, if I had to pick what I would expect to see in the finals at this point, I do believe it will be Boston versus Oklahoma City. Now, with the matchups that you talked about, there's an interesting dynamic that you're referencing that I think gets a little bit more complicated because of the way that Oklahoma City can play their two bigs together. So we've seen the Celtics put Jason Tatum on centers before with the intention of being able to switch ball screens, right? And shut down a team's primary ball screen attack. Now, so much of this depends on what direction the Thunder go with their starters. Like, is this going to be a situation where they play Chet and Isaiah Hartenstein together with the starters? Or is this going to be a situation where they choose to start an Alex Caruso instead and go with Chet at center? Like, those are the different dynamics that could change this. But I think it's actually far more likely that they put Tatum on Chet than on Hartenstein. The main reason why is because Hartenstein is not a pick and pop threat, and he's not really much of a vertical spacing threat. So it's not like the Dallas Mavericks problem where you could open up a bunch of easy lob dunks, because while Hartenstein does have some finishing ability on the roll and some really good short roll finishing ability with this floater, he's not the vertical spacing threat that you see from some of the other vertical centers in the league, right? And so Chet's ability to pick and pop on Porzingis would be a problem because you're not going to want to switch with Porzingis as much. And if you put Porzingis on Chet, they're just going to spam pick and pop and get Chet into space at the top of the key with an opportunity to shoot a three or drive a closeout. So if you put Tatum on Chet, then you can switch the Shea Chet ball screen or the J-Dub Chet ball screen. And with Porzingis, you can at least force Hartenstein to make his little floater that he has to make as he attacks Porzingis helping in those ball screen situations. So I think that's more likely how they'd match up. The J-Dub and Shea thing gets really tricky because conventional wisdom would tell you putting Jaylen Brown on Shea, he's your best perimeter defender when he's locked in and engaged. He's your best opportunity to slow Shea down, so to speak. But I would argue that creates a complicated matchup with a guy like a Jalen Williams. Like, I wouldn't put Derek White on Jalen Williams because I think you're giving up a little bit too much strength there. Derek White is such a good off-ball defender, such a good rim protector as a guard. I would slide Drew Holiday onto Jalen Williams and put Derek White on Lou Dort and have him as the roamer, the guy who's helping but still offering contests in those situations. I think you could go either way with Drew on Jalen, or excuse me, with Drew on Jalen and Jalen on Shea, or you could go with Drew on Shea or Jalen on Jalen. But either way, I think it's most important to keep Porzingis out of the pick and pop and to keep Derek White out of a situation where he's guarding somebody that's too strong for him. And I think that gives them their best chance. On the other end of the floor, I think it's pretty straightforward. You're going to get Dort on Tatum. I think you're going to get J-Dub on Jaylen Brown, right? I think you're going to end up getting Hartenstein on Porzingis because he's more of a post-up threat. And again, with Boston, it also depends. Like, are they, how often are you going to see two big looks? How are you going to match up when they do go to two big looks? There's going to be situations where that gets complicated. But I look at the Thunder as more of a switch and contain type of team with trying to guard Boston. And so I think we will see some small ball looks. We will see some Chet at center, a lot of switching everything and trying to contain the ball. And to me, the biggest swing factor of the series is going to be decision-making for both teams. To me, the Thunder actually remind me a lot of the Celtics back in 2022, where they just have this sky-high potential based on what they do on the defensive end of the floor. And they have all this offensive talent, but they just make some sketchy decisions a lot in big spots. And Boston has outgrown a lot of that over the last couple of years in their growth into becoming a champion. And that's my number one concern with Oklahoma City is when they get into high leverage situations, their decision making. That said, as we saw, we can see Oklahoma City do similar things to Boston that Boston struggled with in the past in terms of decision making, handling perimeter defenders that contain the ball and force them into tough, contested pull-up jump shots instead of the wide open catch and shoot jump shots that make their offense so unguardable. And so I think decision-making on offense is going to be the biggest key for both teams in that series. Again, I'll go much deeper into that if we get to that point. We're going to do series previews for every single playoff series like we do every single year. And so no matter who ends up playing in the finals, we will do deep dive breakdowns before the series when the time comes. Hey, Jason, commenting from all the way across the pond in not-so-sunny England. Love the show and have been watching for years. How much of a realistic shot do you think Draymond has at Defensive Player of the Year this year? With Wemby unfortunately getting hurt, it opened up for someone else to sneak in and grab one this year. If the Warriors went, say, 10-3 in their last games this year and Dre plays excellent defense as he did against Milwaukee, is he in with a real shot? Again, love the show and hope all is well. Thanks again for support, and hopefully you get some better weather over there. Here in Tucson, it's going to be like yesterday it was 96 degrees, so we're already heading into the summertime. I think Draymond would be my pick for Defensive Player of the Year if the season ended today. I think Evan Mobley's had a great defensive season. I just think Draymond Green's a better and more disruptive defensive player. I think Draymond suffers a little bit from the reputation in the sense that, like, he's just been such a good defender for so long that people just don't think about it as often. And Mobley, even though he's been a defensive prospect his whole life, this season it's just been a lot of narrative weight behind him and what the Cavs have accomplished this year. But, like, I don't think you have to do much more than just watch some of these two teams play and just watch how important Draymond is to what they do defensively and his ability to show up at the level but get back. And he's one of the best defenders in the league at being two places at once, having a foot in the paint, disrupting things, but being able to close out and get excellent contests on three-point shots on the weak side. He's such a great defensive playmaker. To me, he's the best defensive player that I've watched this season. On DraftKings, Draymond right now is the favorite at minus 130. Evan Mobley at plus 110, and then Dyson Daniels at plus 1,300 in third place. I like that value for Draymond simply because Golden State has a lot more to play for over the course of this final stretch of the season. Cleveland has nothing to play for but get to mid-April healthy, and so you're just going to see a higher level of intensity out of the Warriors over the course of these final few weeks of the season, and I think that just bodes well for Draymond's capability to lock up that award. When it comes to college basketball and March Mania, one thing is for sure. Nothing's for sure. Upsets, buzzer beaters, Cinderellas advancing, top seeds going home early. It's all gonna happen. Bet the unexpected, every upset, every day with DraftKings Sportsbook. With live betting, exclusive content, promos, and parlays, DraftKings is the ultimate college basketball destination for March. Ready to make your first bet? Check out the matchups and pick a team to win. It's that simple. I'm a big Arizona Wildcats fan, born and raised here in Tucson, Arizona. I'm a little skeptical about them on the offensive end of the floor, but they looked really good on defense again last night against Kansas, so I'll probably be betting on them this time around. First time, here's something special just for you. New DraftKings customers bet $5 to get $200 in bonus bets instantly. Bet the unexpected with DraftKings Sportsbook. Download the DraftKings Sportsbook app and use code HOOPS. That's HOOPS. That's code HOOPS for new customers. Get $200 in bonus bets when you bet just $5. Only on DraftKings. The crown is yours. Gambling problem? Call 1-800-GAMBLER. In New York, call 877-8-HOPE-NY or text HOPE-NY to 467-369. In Connecticut, help is available for problem gambling. Call 888-789-7777 or visit ccpg.org. Please play responsibly on behalf of Boot Hill Casino and Resort in Kansas. 21 plus, age and eligibility varies by jurisdiction. Void in Ontario. New customers only. Bonus bets expire 168 hours after issuance. For additional terms and responsible gaming resources, see dkng.co/audio. I understand resting your team during the regular season is really important. Don't you think teams like the Cavs or even OKC should practice their playoff rotation more? I doubt they're both going to be running 10-man units with their stars playing 30 minutes per game. I like what Missoula is doing, playing Tatum and Brown 40-plus minutes in important games to kind of prepare their bodies for that grind. What do you think the balance should be? I think any sort of upside from pushing minutes like that is counteracted by the process of getting to the postseason healthy. I think it's important context that Joe Mazzulla, like for instance in the Lakers game, he pushes Jason Tatum's minutes way up, but he sits him for the 2 games surrounding that game. So yeah, he played 46 minutes or whatever it was, but that was the only basketball he played in like a 5-day span. And so I don't think it's as straightforward as like, oh, Mazzulla's pushing his guys a lot harder. I think both of these teams in just different ways are conserving themselves to make sure that they're ready to go when they get into the postseason. And like, again, it's like with Tatum's ankle injury. It's like there's just absolutely no reason to push it because you're going to end up in a first round series. Again, if you think about OKC, think about Boston. Boston is going to end up playing a play-in team from the Eastern Conference. And Oklahoma City is going to end up playing a play-in team from the Western Conference. Right now, if the season ended today and the seeds stayed where they were, Boston's going to get a 7-game series against the Atlanta Hawks, okay? If the season ended today, Oklahoma City is going to get a tougher matchup, someone like a Clippers or a Wolves, but they're going to be a substantial favorite in that series. I would argue OKC has a little bit more danger in terms of a first-round potential upset, but like if you're Boston, for instance, like you could theoretically use the Atlanta Hawks series as like a playoff training camp to get ready for the rest of the postseason. I mean, I remember the Warriors, the year they won the title, Steph came off the bench in the Nuggets series as he was coming back from a foot strain. And it just didn't matter because they had the Nuggets without Jamal Murray and Michael Porter Jr. as a tune-up to prepare for the rest of the postseason. And by the way, that's the reward you get when you win a shit ton of regular season games. You get a little bit more of a lighter opponent in that first round. Now, again, Oklahoma City, that is such a... Dude, that's so brutal that, like, if Oklahoma City has to face, like, the full-strength Minnesota Timberwolves as a first-round opponent as their award for starting the season 60-12, it's just completely insane. But that said, I don't think either team is making any sort of mistake in the way they're managing their health over the course of the final phase of the season. Where would a second title put Giannis all time? I assume top 10. And if that is the case, does he become undoubtedly the greatest player of this generation? So first of all, I think Giannis is very far away from a second title. I think it will require him changing teams. But like we talked about in the show on Wednesday, there's a version of this where he gets traded to Oklahoma City and he can win a title as soon as next year. My thing is like, you have to start digging into it. Like, let's say that Giannis has 2 titles in this era, and his 2 titles are in 2021 in the COVID year, beating the injury-demolished Nets, the Trae Young Hawks, and the Devin Booker Suns, and winning a title on the Oklahoma City Thunder team that we've talked about would be the most talented roster since the 2018 Warriors versus what Nikola Jokic has accomplished in his era. Again, I think all titles are titles, but we can all agree that no 2 titles are the same in terms of just the degree of difficulty and the way they resonate in the court of public opinion. I just think Jokic has been a better basketball player over the course of this generation than Giannis. And so unless Giannis did something insane, like let's say win the title with this year's Bucks, I would have a hard time moving him past Jokic. Now, to be clear, if Giannis goes and carries this Bucks team to a title, Totally different conversation. I would argue that Giannis winning with this Bucks team would be a more impressive accomplishment than anything Jokic has done over the course of his career so far. So, like, a lot of it just depends on the circumstances surrounding that second title. How do you view career accolades factoring into your all-time rankings? Accolades like titles, gold medals, MVP, Defensive Player of the Year, All-NBA, career point, rebound, assist totals, scoring champion, etc., compared to eye test, and who's better. I would argue compared to most people who cover the league, I look at awards less. There's then a certain amount of politics involved. There's a certain amount of like data and advanced metrics involved and how that can kind of poison that sort of situation. I do pay attention to that sort of thing. Like, I think, all NBA, for instance, like if a guy is racking up first team all NBAs, it's a pretty good sign that he's just been, perennially considered one of the 5 best players in the league. If a guy is, perennially getting like Jokic winning 3 MVPs in 4 years, I don't think that's an accomplishment that you can just ignore or make light of. That said, to me, ultimately, what I look at as the number one accomplishment is a singular player performing for a team in long playoff runs / championship runs. You can't only look at championship runs because only one of the 30 teams wins. And so there's a certain amount of like if a guy just routinely every year, like Jimmy Butler, for instance, like him just routinely taking his team to the conference finals and finals year after year like he did with the Heat there for a while, that to me is more impressive than a guy racking up a bunch of regular season accolades, right? Like, for instance, like if you asked me who I thought was a better basketball player, Jimmy Butler or James Harden, I'm going to pick Jimmy Butler because James Harden has all of these accolades, but he's struggled to get it translated to the phase of basketball that determines who wins the trophy. Ultimately, why do we play NBA basketball? We play NBA basketball for the Larry O'Brien trophy. That is the one thing that everything comes down to. From the moment you show up to training camp and you have those first meetings with the coaching staff and they start establishing their expectations and culture and stuff, what do they talk about? We're here to get the Larry O'Brien trophy. That same goal translates all the way through. They've added things. We have our in-season tournament now as a mix-up. Obviously Olympic basketball carries its own weight. But ultimately, the dream for every professional basketball player in the world is to make it to the NBA and to win the Larry O'Brien trophy. And so, to me, everything in the context of the pursuit of that and what translates to the pursuit of that is going to outweigh the accolades. Doesn't mean the accolades don't matter. Doesn't mean the accolades aren't something that I factor in. And on the pursuit of the Larry O'Brien trophy front, you don't even necessarily have to get it for me to think that you're capable of getting it. Like, there's a version of Jimmy Butler's career where he plays with more talent and he has 2 or 3 titles. There's a version of it where he plays for the San Antonio Spurs and the Toronto Raptors, and he gets multiple titles the way that a guy like Kawhi Leonard did, right? And so even though I think Kawhi Leonard at his peak was a better player than Jimmy Butler, I think Jimmy's closer to that level than he is to the James Harden type of regular season accolade machine that can struggle to succeed in the postseason context. This is an interesting one. Who's a bigger liability on defense between Jokic and Luka? This one's tough. I think they're close, but I would give a slight edge in terms to who's a bigger liability to Luka. And ultimately, it just comes down to size. They both really struggle. Neither of them can guard one-on-one on the perimeter very well in space. They're both elite defensive rebounders, which I think is an asset on the defensive end of the floor that is under-discussed. Like, Luka has helped make the Lakers a serviceable rebounding team despite a lack of size at the center position because he's an excellent defensive rebounder. Not as an athlete, but he just has a nose for the ball, meaning he's just good at anticipating where the ball is going to come off the rim, and he's got a good pursuit of the ball that allows him to get a lot of defensive rebounds. That said, 2 things. Jokic is a little bit better defensive rebounder than Luka. And 2, Jokic is big, which allows you to set up potential defensive schemes that keep him around the rim or put him in situations where he can be successful. it's harder to do with Luka. Point being, if you're building an elite defense from scratch, I think it's a little bit easier to build one around Jokic than it is to build one around Luka. That said, they're both defensive liabilities. Jokic has been a substantial defensive liability since he won the title. I don't know what's going on there. He just hasn't really committed to that end of the floor as well as he used to. They're both bad on that end, but I would give Jokic a slight edge as a better defender than Luka. Do you think that this is LeBron's last chance to win a title? If next year even they improve the team, he will be on the same level and get the Lakers to come back into contention. I don't think this is LeBron's last chance. I think next year will certainly be his last chance in terms of like at a star level. There's an offseason here where the Lakers immediately become a buyout destination, or not a buyout destination, a veteran minimum destination. The Lakers are going to get some discounted talent this summer because you want to go play in LA for Luka Doncic and LeBron James and have an opportunity to contend for a title. Like, that's going to be really appealing to people, especially players that are play finishers that would benefit from what Luka Doncic does. The next year's Lakers, I expect to be a top tier contender right out the gates. I think they're going to be a really, really good team with a summer to rebuild around Luka and LeBron. That said, right before LeBron strained his groin against the Celtics, he was playing at a top 5 level. You combine that with Luka Doncic, who has been playing at a top 5 level since then. The two of them together with Austin Reeves, with Rui Hachimura, with Jackson Hayes as the vertical spacer, with Dorian Finney-Smith, Gabe Vincent, Jared Vanderbilt. This is certainly the best chance he's had since 2021. And I certainly consider this to be a real chance. I just think he'll probably have a slightly better chance next year. Now, to your point, LeBron will be 41 next year when they get to the postseason. He'll be older. He probably won't be as good. There will be some small amount of decline, barring a severe injury. If that's the case, though, with better supporting talent, and now that Luka's in the picture, they don't need LeBron's top end as much anymore. They need a consistent floor with him, which I still think will be there next year. And I think that that's something that they will be able to leverage into competing again for a title one more time next season. Last one. Denver fan here. With the roster shortcomings of the Nuggets, what are some offseason things you think they should consider? Players they should think about trading, players they should go after. Seems they could use a restructuring of the roster, but I still love the ceiling of the core 5 when firing on all cylinders. I've thought about this a lot, and it's complicated because Michael Porter Jr. in particular has been so important to this team and what they do on offense over the course of this era. That said, if they lose again, and it looks like defense is the issue, which has been an issue over the course of the last couple of years, I would strongly consider doing everything in my power to upgrade the Michael Porter Jr. spot with more of a two-way type of talent. It'd be really interesting, for example, if you could imagine a scenario where, let's just as a theoretical example, I'm not saying this is going to happen, but let's take a theoretical example. What if you were to swap Michael Porter Jr. and Jaden McDaniels? You bring Jaden McDaniels in, suddenly you have Christian Brown, Jaden McDaniels, and Aaron Gordon anchoring Jokic and Murray. That is a version of this team that has a level they can get to defensively that is different than what they're at right now. Aaron Gordon has turned himself into a knockdown three-point shooter. You can invert the roles so that Jaden McDaniels is operating more as that baseline finisher and Aaron Gordon is operating more as the floor spacer, right? In that sort of scenario, you reconfigure the team to being good enough defensively. You can imagine a version with Minnesota where you're putting just this knockdown weak side scorer spacer that creates a lot more space for Julius Randle. Well, he might not even be there anymore, but for Anthony Edwards to get downhill and get to the basket. And so that's just an example, but like I would just strongly consider actively hunting for a defensive-minded 3 so that you can up your defensive floor and count more on Jokic and Murray to just score enough to push you over the top versus being in this situation now where they have to beat this world-beating offense to have any chance to win, which I think is unsustainable. All right, guys, that's all I have for this week's mailbag. As always, I sincerely appreciate you guys for supporting me and supporting the show. We will be back with our breakdown with Sam Esfandiari on the Warriors, which should be coming out tomorrow. I will see you guys then.